We never think that when we go out to have a good time, that it may turn into a nightmare scenario that we may not escape. But there are many reported instances of clubs using pyrotechnics with disastrous consequences. It happens too often, but I will focus on two for now: the Station Nightclub Fire and the Colectiv Nightclub Fire. Both had too many injured, too many casualties, all of which could have been prevented. Both where musicians in mainstream bands tragically lost their lives.
In depth tonight, finger pointing, but no clear answers in the investigation into that deadly nightclub fire in West Warwick, Rhode Island. There is a vigil scheduled to get underway to remember the 97 people who lost their lives, the second memorial of the day. But amid the memorials and grief, investigators are asking hard questions. They claim they're not getting the answers they need to pinpoint exactly who or what was to blame.
Formed in 1977, Great White was a popular hair metal band from the 80s. But by the late 90s, their popularity had dwindled, causing them to break up in 2001. Frontman Jack Russell attempted to start his own solo career, but was failing to gain any notoriety as a solo act. By late 2002, in an attempt to capture the magic he had during the 80s, Russell contacted the former lead guitarist of Great White, Mark Kendall. The two agreed to do limited shows with Kendall playing with Russell's backup band, and promoting themselves as Jack Russell's Great White. On February 12, 2003, Great White was booked at the Station, a small venue in West Warwick, Rhode Island, that could only hold up to 404 people at the time. According to Russell, he had been given permission to shoot off pyro at the club, but the owners, a couple of brothers named Jeffrey and Michael Didarian, have denied that Russell asked them for permission. To me, it seems strange that the club owners would allow such a thing, considering there wasn't even a sprinkler system in the club in case of a fire. The concert didn't even get a chance to start. While playing the opening song, Desert Moon, the band's tour manager, Daniel Beakley, lit sparklers behind Russell. The sparklers set off the acoustic foam that lined the stage area. Once ignited, the foam released carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide gas, a deadly combination for anyone in the front row. At first, the crowd hadn't realized something was wrong, but the black smoke that formed due to the urethane and polyurethane foam, and Russell saying offhandedly, "That's not good," clued the people in that something was wrong. The crowd panicked and tried to escape, but 2 of the 4 exits were chained shut while the backstage exit was blocked by bouncers. This caused a stampede of people heading for the front door, while some headed for any place they could find for safety from the fire. 100 people lost their lives, while 230 ended up severely injured. Guitarist Ty Longley was one of the ones who died. He had gone back for his guitar thinking the fire was no big deal. A DJ named Mike the Dr. Gonsalves also felt the same way, and he ended up going back for his equipment. He also perished in the fire. At one point after a sound check, Russell decided to count free tickets to the show, swelling the crowd to 462, well above what the club could hold. The blame would only be leveled at 3 people: Jeffrey and Michael Didarian and Daniel Beakley. They were the only ones charged, and all 3 were charged with involuntary manslaughter. On top of being charged, the Didarians would also have to pay $1.7 million and forced to pay workmen's compensation to all employees, including the families of the 4 who perished in the fire. As for their sentencing, both brothers actually pleaded no contest. Michael Didarian would be sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 4 to be served and 11 years suspended, plus 3 years probation. Then his brother, Jeffrey Didarian, got off light. 10 years suspended sentence with 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service. A grief-stricken Daniel Beakley would plead guilty. He would receive 15 years, with 4 to serve and 11 years suspended. But the outpouring support for him from the survivors and the victims' families would see him get released after 2 years.
There was more devastation and gut-wrenching grief today in Romania following a deadly fire at a nightclub in Bucharest. At least 27 people were killed and nearly 200 injured when the special effects at a concert apparently sparked a fire.
Before I begin the next section, I have to admit that I am probably going to butcher some names since these are all Romanian names, and I apologize ahead of time to anyone watching who is from Romania. Goodbye to Gravity was a metalcore band. Metalcore is a blend of screaming vocals and hard riffs. Bands like Architects, Hatebreed, and Killswitch Engage are popular in the genre. Frontman Andrei Galut was a contestant in a Romanian show called Megastar. He would end up winning the competition and starting his own band in 2010. Goodbye to Gravity would find success in their home country after their self-titled album in 2012. On October 30th, 2015, Goodbye to Gravity was booked at Club Colectiv in Bucharest, Romania. The band had been given permission by the 3 club owners to shoot off pyrotechnics. About an hour and a half before midnight, the pyrotechnics were set off, catching a pillar with acoustic foam on it on fire. Much like the station fire, the crowd had thought it was a part of the show until the fire started to spread up into the ceiling. It was then a mass panic. 300 to 500 people began stampeding towards the only working exit, trying to escape the hellish fire that engulfed the ceiling. The ceiling, which was supported by pillars, collapsed. 146 people were injured, and 64 people died. The guitarists Vlad Talea and Mihail Alexandru died on scene. Drummer Bogdan Inash, bassist Alex Pascu, and Andrei Galut were rushed to hospital. Only Galut would survive. Honestly, I couldn't find much on the aftermath of the fire besides the many issues with the Romanian healthcare system and how the 24 that died in the fire had swelled to 64 in the coming months. While some sites actually say the club owners were charged with negligent homicide and negligent bodily harm, I couldn't find anything on their sentencing, and I tried really hard. As for Andrei Galut, the last thing that I could find was from 2018, and he was still recovering in a burn clinic in Germany. Both fires could have been prevented. In the case of Club Colectiv, I feel it's more the fault of the club owners. There was flammable material there, and that pyrotechnics had a chance to cause a massive fire, and they allowed it anyways. Add on to the fact there was only one exit, it's easy to assume that the owners were actually grossly negligent. Station Nightclub didn't have a sprinkler system, and 2 of the 4 exits were actually blocked off by chains. Bouncers at the back of the club were stopping people from escaping through the back during the fire, causing a mass stampede towards the front. Jack Russell claims that he had permission to shoot off pyro in the club, while the Didarians claim they did not give him permission to do so. In all honesty, I think the club owners are the ones telling the truth in the situation. When we go out for a night to have a good time, we all think we're going to make it home. A bit buzzed, drunk, stoned, or completely sober, we expect to wake up the next day. We take our lives for granted at times. Let's just remember the ones who suffered, who lost loved ones, or passed in a senseless tragedy. Let their lives never be forgotten.